The story starts in the male restroom, where the protagonist, Seatome, is hiding so he can skip his PE class. Unfortunately, a group of busty baddies casually strolls into the boys' restroom. When Seatome protests and demands they leave the boys' toilet immediately, the freaky girls lift their skirts, flashing their colorful peach covers. Seatome panics and immediately bolts out of the restroom like a clueless virgin. As he sprints down the hallway, Seatome reflects on how, despite it being 2 months since he enrolled in this school of freaks, he already wants to quit. This school used to be an all-girls academy, but after becoming co-ed, Seatome ended up as the only boy among 359 girls. He never had much choice in the matter since his parents were broke, and this was the only publicly funded academy in the area. While this situation sounds like a dream to every simp alive, for Seatome, it's nothing but a curse, since in this school, he's treated worse than trash. When Seatome finally rushes into the classroom, hoping to get some peace, the crazy girls immediately yell at him to piss off, saying it's time for them to change into their gym wear. As usual, they treat him like he's less than human and physically kick him back out. In the chaos, Seatome's head accidentally slams straight into the bouncy milk jugs of the most feared Jaru on campus, Hanako. Seatome freezes at her intimidating presence, fully expecting her to cave his skull in. But just then, a sweet and innocent-looking girl named Taki intervenes, insisting that Hanako should apologize too for bumping into Seatome. But Hanako only gives Seatome a deadly stare before walking away, clearly not in the mood to throw hands with anyone. With Hanako gone, Seatome thanks Taki for saving him from getting beaten up, but Taki tells him it's fine, admitting it was their fault for not letting him know they would be changing at that time. Seatome is taken aback by her kindness because, since he enrolled in the school, he has never met a kind girl. But then he figures that the reason she is being unusually kind to him must be because they are both members of the class committee. Once the tension settles, Taki brings up the committee meeting scheduled for later that day and suggests they head to the rooftop during lunch to discuss committee matters. Seatome agrees, so about past noon that day, they both head to the rooftop. As soon as they arrive, a strong gust of wind nearly flips up Taki's skirt. She struggles to keep it down, but in the process, her committee memos and phone scatter across the floor. Seatome, being a gentleman, helps her gather everything. However, while doing so, Taki squats to help but accidentally exposes her Victoria's secret. Even though Seatome has no intention of staring at her plot armor, his eyes betray him, staring with unforgivable intensity, until Taki notices him staring so hard and then starts teasing him. But then things get weird when Taki suddenly starts threatening to expose Seatome for being a creep unless he gives her 10,000 yen. Seatome freaks out when he hears this, and at that point, he realizes that all Taki's good girl act was nothing more than a carefully laid trap to blackmail him for money. When Seatome refuses to give the blackmailing tramp a single dime, the door leading to the stairwell suddenly swings open, and to his horror, he realizes someone has been recording everything the entire time. Moments later, as 3 other girls from Taki's squad join in the blackmail, Taki threatens to post the video on TikTok and ruin his school life if Seatome refuses to comply. Seatome desperately begs them not to, but when the wicked girls start teasing and ogling him, Hanako suddenly bursts into the scene like some Gotham City vigilante. She tells Taki and her crew that their stupid laughter is disturbing her nap and demands they delete the video of Seatome acting like a creep. When Taki smugly asks if Hanako is Seatome's friend, Hanako bluntly says she could never be friends with a little perv like him. Still, she adds that she despises hoes who use dirty tricks to prey on people. Still, Taki refuses to delete the clip, insisting Seatome is to blame for staring at things he shouldn't have been looking at. But before she can finish her sentence, Hanako kicks the phone out of her hand like a Shaolin master and snatches it midair. Taki is stunned by her sudden display of martial skill, but as she stumbles backward, she crashes her cake straight into Seatome's face. Hanako then deletes the video and threatens to record Taki instead, humiliatingly sprawled on the floor, and post that online. This instantly enrages Taki and her squad, and sensing the situation spiraling toward an all-out brawl, Seatome tries to play peacemaker and begs everyone to calm down. But Hanako responds by punching him square in the face for trying to be a good guy. Everyone freezes as Seatome drops instantly, knocked unconscious by the blow. Later that afternoon, as Seatome leaves the infirmary, Hanako apologizes for redesigning his face, but Seatome tells her it's fine, grateful that her actions scared off Taki and her vixens. However, when Seatome starts taking the gratitude too far, Hanako gets irritated and snaps at him. She awkwardly explains that there's no need to overdo it, since he bumped into her earlier while she smashed his face afterward, so they're even. When Hanako notices Seatome staring at her in disbelief, she aggressively gets in his face and angrily demands to know if he has a problem with her. Panicking, Seatome quickly blurts out that he has no problem with her. He explains that ever since enrolling at the academy, he's been surrounded by bad baddies, so he was genuinely shocked to discover that Taki was just like the rest of them. Then in a nervous rush, Seatome admits that Hanako feels different, and because of that, he awkwardly says he likes her and even finds her pretty cute. Hearing this, Hanako slowly turns beet red, then her ears turns red, and then everything else. However, to prevent Seatome from seeing just how flustered she is, Hanako abruptly bolts down the stairs. After regaining her composure, she stops, turns back, and finally introduces herself properly. She then tells Seatome to shout her name if anyone ever tries to bully him again. As Hanako walks away, Seatome remains frozen in place, completely awestruck. He realizes that all this time, he had written her off as some scary bad girl, when in reality, she's surprisingly cute and innocent. He had wanted nothing more than to quit the academy, but after seeing that not everyone is as bad as he thought, Seatome decides he won't run anymore, and instead, he is motivated to stay and survive this madness. The next day, Seatome heads to school, but unfortunately, the shortest route to school is through a train station. On a normal morning, this station is already packed with girls heading to school, which is why it's commonly referred to as the Maiden Railway. Seatome just stands there crushed in the crowd, sweating bullets, surrounded by nothing but uniformed girls, chatter, and zero personal space. He already knows this commute is a daily nightmare, because one wrong movement on this train can instantly turn him into a criminal. And sure enough, it happens, as out of nowhere, a girl spins around and accuses him of touching her. Seatome completely freezes, raises both hands in surrender, and desperately points out that both his hands are clearly gripping his bag. The girl does not care. The surrounding crowd starts staring, and Seatome realizes this is exactly how his mornings always begin. By the time he survives the train ride, Seatome is already exhausted before classes even start. He reflects on how this is basically one boy versus hundreds of girls every single morning, and he is losing badly. One careless moment, one misunderstanding, and his entire life could be over, especially after the incident that happened with Taki. Seatome finally arrives at school that day and tells himself he cannot afford distractions today. But the day gets worse as that morning's lesson turns out to be a fashion class, which means Seatome is forced to help measure the bust sizes of the thirsty girls in his class. As he takes the measurements, the girls take turns laughing and openly mock his reaction. Even the girl being measured named Ushi joins in, teasing Seatome and asking if her massive juggernauts are making him feel all bricked up. The girls treat him like a shared toy, poking, teasing, and pushing his limits while pretending it is all harmless fun. Even when he begs them to stop and just let him finish the measurements, they only find it funnier. When it's Seatome's turn to get measured, every girl volunteers on measuring the length of his rod. Seatome panics, but the more he protests, the harder they press him. Before he can escape, they overwhelm him and get increasingly handsy. But just as things spiral out of control, the class bell rings like some divine intervention, signaling the end of fashion class, and the teacher is forced to postpone all unfinished work until after school. This only enrages the girls, who immediately redirect their frustration towards Seatome and demand that he finish the remaining sewing all by himself. With no other choice, Seatome gathers all the loose clothing that still needs work and heads toward an empty classroom to store everything. Along the way, he crashes straight into Hanako's airbags yet again, and Hanako instantly gets irritated, assuming he's doing it on purpose this time. Seatome, however, is completely lost in thought, distracted by how insanely hot the Amazon Queen looks in her gym wear. But Hanako brings him back to earth when she curiously asks if he is in the fashion class. Before Seatome can stammer out a proper answer, Hanako notices the massive pile of clothes in his arms and is confused as to how one person could possibly sew all of that alone. But Seatome quickly tells her not to worry and nervously bids her farewell, which only makes Hanako even more curious. So after school that day, Seatome begins sorting through the measurements and prepares to start sewing when the girls from his class suddenly burst into the empty classroom, demanding to know if he's finished yet. Startled by their sudden appearance, Seatome replies that there's only one left to complete. Hearing this, Ushi lights up and her attitude shifts from teasing to genuine surprise. She then starts to shamelessly flirt with Seatome, asking him to forget the sewing and suggests they move on to something more intimate instead. But Seatome panics and flatly refuses, warning her that the teacher could walk in at any moment. Still, she refuses to back off. Instead, she escalates her seduction tactics and decides to give Seatome an exclusive show. As she starts removing her plot coverage, Seatome desperately begs her to stop. But she continues, until she notices the sight of someone climbing the classroom window, wearing a dark, unreadable expression. The blonde girl freezes, and then screams like she's just saw a monster from Stranger Things. But it turns out the person outside the window is Hanako, who, having suspected something freaky was going on, enters the class through the window. With her usual calm and detached expression, she demands the girls leave Seatome. The moment the girls realize it's Hanako, the infamous crazy girl, they start trembling and immediately flee the classroom. But as soon as they're gone, Hanako snaps at Seatome, scolding him for not telling her he was being bullied. But Seatome quietly explains that he didn't want to keep bothering her with his problems. However, while speaking, Seatome suddenly notices that all the buttons on Hanako's shirt have popped off. When he nervously points it out, Hanako freaks out and immediately scrambles to cover her assets. But Seatome offers to help sew the buttons back on, and while doing that, he asks how they even came off in the first place. Embarrassed, Hanako admits they probably snapped when she climbed up the tree earlier to reach the classroom window and save him. But when Seatome shyly tells her she didn't need to go through all that trouble, Hanako, blushing hard, insists it was no stress at all. A moment later, Seatome finishes sewing the buttons and hands her the shirt. Hanako is surprised by how fast and clean the work is, but Seatome opens up, explaining that he lives in a tailor shop, which he might inherit someday, and then adds that the main reason he chose this nightmare of a school was because of its fashion classes. As he returns the shirt, Seatome takes the chance to thank Hanako again for saving him earlier from Taki and her crew. But Hanako, still blushing red, simply nods before quietly asking him to always address her by her first name instead. When Seatome does exactly that, Hanako becomes intensely flustered. And in her panic, her jiggly, oversized pillows once again pop every single button on her shirt. The following day, while everyone else enjoys their lunch break, eating or casually gisting with friends, Seatome's lunch periods are always painfully awkward. Being the only guy among 359 girls, he naturally attracts an unhealthy amount of attention from girls in his class, making it impossible for him to eat in peace. No matter where he goes, even out in the schoolyard, girls stare at him like he wandered into the wrong ecosystem, which makes him wildly uncomfortable. Completely fed up, Seatome finally decides to eat his lunch in the male restroom, the only safe zone that's supposed to be free from any girly presence. But the moment he walks in, he nearly jumps out of his skin when he bumps into none other than Hanako. Awkwardly, Hanako explains that the female restroom is too crowded, so she decided to use the male one instead. But Seatome nervously replies that he understands, since most girls use the male restroom anyway, despite the sign clearly stating it's for male students only. Hearing this irritates Hanako. So she asks Seatome to go inside while she stands guard outside to make sure no one else enters. But Seatome lets out an awkward laugh and shyly explains that he wasn't actually there to use the toilet. He just wanted a quiet place to eat his lunch, and hearing this completely shocks Hanako. Seeing her reaction, Seatome immediately regrets the nonsense that just came out of his mouth. Instead of criticizing him, though, Hanako tells him she was also about to have lunch and casually invites him to eat with her at her usual spot. Seatome is taken aback by the unexpected kindness, but he quickly agrees. So they head up to the rooftop, and Seatome slowly realizes this must be Hanako's favorite place. The space is quiet, open, and far away from the chaos below, which already feels unreal to him. But just as he starts relaxing, Hanako tells him to close his eyes for a second. He hesitates, but does it anyway, fully expecting something terrible to happen. However, he is shocked to the bones when he cracks one eye open and see Hanako already climbing up the wall toward a ladder like some genetically altered mutant. She scales it effortlessly, like some ninja from Hidden Leaf Village, all the way up to the top near the water tank, then looks down and tells Seatome to copy exactly what she just did. But Seatome looks at the ladder, looks at the fence, looks at the height, and immediately regrets every life decision he has ever made. He freaks out, says he cannot climb, and is convinced he is about to die. Hanako just sighs and tells him to use the fence instead, making it sound way easier than it actually is. But since Seatome is nothing but a weak loser, Hanako grabs his hand and helps pull him up like some dead weight. Once Seatome finally makes it to the top, he's left speechless by the breathtaking view of the city below. Hanako explains that this spot was already here the very first time she climbed up, which explains why there's random stuff like a chair waiting for her. Seatome pieces it together and realizes this is also the exact place she jumped from before, which quietly reminds him how reckless she can be. As they eat together, Hanako casually tells Seatome that she doesn't mind if he starts using her favorite spot as his regular lunch hangout. But Seatome gets flustered and admits the only reason he can even get up here is because he's with her, since there's no way he could climb that ladder alone. Hearing that, Hanako smiles with clear excitement and then officially declares that from now on, it'll be their secret spot. Seeing the big blondie smile for the first time, Seatome realizes that beneath her delinquent behavior, she's actually a cutie. The conversation soon shifts to food, and Seatome comments on the ridiculous amount of food Hanako eats. But Hanako gets embarrassed and argues that she moves around a lot, which is why she eats like she has a tank in her stomach. When Seatome asks if she's into sports or something, Hanako, now more relaxed around him, admits that she used to play a sport but quit after a while. Seatome then confesses that he's absolutely terrible at sports. But just as he starts explaining how miserable he is at anything physical, he notices something shocking. Hanako has fallen asleep, dozing off and snoring like a faulty generator. Seatome stares in disbelief, realizing this is the first time he's ever seen a girl nap so easily. But what shocks him even more is how carelessly she's sleeping, knowing a guy is right there with her. Seatome immediately decides it would be best to leave, but when he tries to climb down, the height makes him panic and he quickly chickens out. So now, with no choice, he decides to stay put and wait for Hanako until she wakes. But then the wind suddenly picks up, Hanako's skirt shifts slightly, and Seatome's brain completely melts. He debates whether he should fix it or pretend he saw nothing, knowing either choice could ruin his life. His mind starts spiraling with thoughts, and he starts reasoning through different scenarios. He reasons if he tries to adjust her skirt and she wakes up, she'll think he's a creep and punch his brain out. On the other hand, if he does nothing, she might wake up, catch him staring at her mushy parts, and still punch his brain out. After carefully weighing both disasters, Seatome decides that option 1 is the lesser evil and hopes she doesn't wake up. So he cautiously reaches out to adjust her skirt. But the moment he does, Hanako suddenly grabs his hand in her sleep and locks him into a brutal wrestling submission hold. Seatome screams in terror, convinced she's awake, but to his shock, she's still fast asleep. Minutes later, Hanako finally wakes up from her deep slumber, only to find Seatome sprawled unconscious on the floor. She stares at him in stunned confusion, having no idea what just happened. Before long, every student gathers in the gym for PE class, which is Seatome's worst nightmare. While everyone pairs up and starts stretching, Seatome, being the only guy in a school full of baddies, can't find anyone to partner with. But then, out of nowhere, Taki approaches him and suggests they pair up, claiming she doesn't have a partner either. Seatome freezes the moment he sees her, but Taki puts on that deceivingly innocent smile, gently reminding him that they're both members of the class committee and should stick together. Seatome is caught off guard, especially because she's acting completely normal, like nothing embarrassing ever happened between them. After the whole rooftop disaster from the other day, his trust in women is hanging by a thread. Still, Taki keeps pressing, even offering to massage his stiff back. As she does, the temptress presses her soft, squishy melons against Seatome's back and casually suggests they hang out after school. Seatome struggles to keep his spiking urges under control, but Taki only smiles and tells him she'll be waiting for him later. Meanwhile, as Taki continues her seduction, the rest of the class is busy playing basketball. Suddenly, one girl, attempting to channel her inner Michael Jordan, launches the ball toward the hoop and ends up nailing it straight into Seatome's face instead. The impact gives Seatome an instant nosebleed, so while most of the girls burst out laughing, Taki immediately volunteers to escort Seatome to the nurse's office. Seatome quickly refuses, insisting he's fine and can go on his own. But Taki shuts that down instantly, firmly telling him she won't let him walk there by himself. Later that day in the nurse's office, Taki stays by Seatome's side, carefully making sure his bloody nose is treated. Seatome is left speechless by her sudden kindness, but he awkwardly thanks her anyway. But Taki just smiles mischievously and tells him not to worry about it, adding that he also gave her the perfect excuse to escape the boring PE class. As the mood softens, she apologizes for trying to blackmail him on the rooftop days earlier. She admits she only wanted a little pocket change, but things spiraled out of control and she overdid it. Trying to act tough, Seatome turns away and tells her to forget about it. He says that as long as it doesn't happen again and his school life stays as uneventful as possible, they're good. He also assures her that he won't snitch or go around exposing her as a tramp or anything like that. Taki softly thanks him, but then things immediately get crazy again as she suddenly pulls out her melon cover and tosses it at him. Seatome is on the verge of losing his mind, but Taki calmly explains that she doesn't just show her turkey slice to anyone. She tells him that as long as it's him, she doesn't mind showing him anything he wants to see. When she notices that Seatome has turned his face away and shut his eyes tight not to be tempted, Taki insists he open them. But Seatome refuses, convinced it's just another blackmail trick to squeeze money out of him. Frustrated, Taki suddenly pounces on him and blurts out that she likes him and wants him to be her boyfriend. Seatome, completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn, immediately rejects her. He tells her he can't be her boyfriend and urges her to value herself more instead of acting like a low-paid dancer. Strangely enough, Seatome's blunt words of counsel only end up rizzing Taki up. She retrieves her plot cover, calls him a nice guy, and admits she's falling for him even harder now. But Seatome, thinking Taki must be covered up now, makes a mistake of turning his face towards her, only to see that the seductive girl still got her juicy cherries on full 1080p display. Taki then smiles sweetly and tells Seatome that now that he's seen her globes, he needs to take responsibility. Seatome freaks out and immediately denies seeing anything. But Taki refuses to back down, insisting that he's now her boyfriend, and that, as her boyfriend, he needs to pay a 3,000 yen sign-up fee. This time, she turns fully manipulative, even shedding crocodile tears as she accuses Seatome of taking advantage of her, especially after being the very one who told her to treasure her body more. At that point, Seatome is speechless, completely confused about what to do. But suddenly, Hanako bursts into the nurse's office, half asleep, yelling at them to shut the heck up and complaining that all the noise is ruining her beautiful sleep. But once the haze clears from her eyes, she freezes in shock at the sight of Seatome in a suspicious position with Taki. Hanako instantly gets heartbroken seeing Seatome in that position and then leaves without saying a word. But Seatome panics and immediately chases after her, desperately trying to explain what she saw. And when he finally catches up, he fumbles through an explanation, even though he has no idea why she's acting so jealous, like a girlfriend. Meanwhile, back in the nurse's office, Taki fumes with anger after being ignored and left behind while Seatome ran after Hanako. Yet deep down, her breathing grows unsteady as she keeps replaying his words in her head. Being told to value herself and her body was something no guy had ever said to her before. Summer arrives, and every student at the academy is required to participate in community service, and that year, they're tasked with cleaning the school pool. Naturally, as the only guy in the entire school, Seatome ends up isolated and forced to clean the pool all by himself while the girls fool around, splashing water on each other and finding the smallest excuses to slip away from work. Their carefree attitude irritates Seatome, but with no real choice, he resigns himself to cleaning the pool alone. But to his shock, Taki suddenly shows up and offers to help. Seatome immediately suspects she's only acting kind because she has some ulterior motive. But wearing her usual innocent expression, Taki insists she's not pretending, explaining that if the two of them work together, they can actually get the pool cleaned properly. Since Seatome is already suspicious of her, Taki decides to show him a little glimpse of her freaky swimsuit, and the sight causes Seatome's brain to short-circuit. But all of a sudden, Hanako appears out of nowhere, holding a cleaning brush, and immediately starts insulting Taki, calling her a shameless flirt. Startled by Hanako's sudden appearance, Seatome asks what she's doing there, and Hanako explains that she heard during lunch that his class was assigned to clean the pool, so she thought it would be best to come help him out. But then, with a sharp tone, Hanako says she'll just leave since she's clearly the third wheel. Seatome panics and desperately tries to stop her, but Taki grabs his arm and holds him back, insisting that the two of them are more than enough, and that they don't need some delinquent getting in the way. Hearing this, Hanako's expression changes, and she calls Taki a blackmailing piece of trash. Taki gets angry and both girls are about to start throwing hands, but Seatome immediately stops them and suggests they all try to get along. He proposes they start by properly introducing themselves, and surprisingly, both bitter rivals agree without another word. They exchange introductions and even shake hands, though the bad energy between them is painfully obvious. Once that's done, they get to work cleaning the pool. A few minutes in, Seatome feels relieved seeing that the job is moving much faster now that Hanako is helping. However, watching how naturally Seatome sticks close to Hanako sparks jealousy in Taki. For the first time in her life, Taki realizes she's actually putting in real effort, which only confuses her more, and she starts wondering why she's even trying so hard to compete with Hanako. Jealousy and frustration swirl inside her, but she can't fully understand why she's feeling this way over Seatome. To her, he was supposed to be nothing more than a boy toy, yet her chest tightens every time she thinks about him. Lost in those thoughts, Taki accidentally kicks over a bucket of water, splashing it straight onto Hanako's face. She immediately apologizes, insisting it was an accident. Hanako, however, sees it as nothing more than a jealous tantrum and instantly loses her temper. So she gets a water hose and blasts Tika with it. Refusing to let it slide, Tika gets her own water hose, and within seconds, a full-blown water war erupts between the two. Meanwhile, Seatome is left alone, still trying to clean the pool. But in the heat of the water-splashing battle, the floor gets slippery, which causes Hanako to trip and crash her Milky's mellows on top of Seatome. Things get even worse when the women from Seatome's class return to check on the pool's progress. But they freeze in shock at the sight of both Taki and Hanako tangled on top of Seatome. The next day in school isn't a pleasant one for Seatome, as everyone is buzzing about the pool incident. And it only gets worse when neither Hanako nor Taki makes any effort to deny the rumors. Soon, the entire academy labels Seatome a creep who takes advantage of girls, leaving him with no room to defend himself. Later that day, while heading home after school, Seatome bumps into Ushi, who looks surprisingly attractive in her casual outfit and can't help but think about how hot she looks. As he tries to strike up a conversation, he suddenly freezes when he notices an older, four-eyed man in a black suit standing beside her. When the dude with glasses spots Seatome, he bluntly asks Ushi who the loser is. Ushi hesitates for a brief moment before denying that she even knows Seatome. She then walks away with the guy, leaving Seatome standing there, completely shocked and confused by what just happened. As Seatome watches them leave, memories rush back. He remembers all the times Ushi flirted with him, even the moment she casually mentioned that lots of pappies out there would pay heavily just to taste her juice. That's when everything clicks, and Seatome finally realizes that by pappies, Ushi had been talking about sugar daddies all along. The next day at school, while eating lunch up the water tank, Seatome can't stop thinking about Ushi and how easily she denied knowing him in front of her sugar daddy. The whole thing leaves him feeling insecure, And when he couldn't hold himself anymore, he turns to Hanako and asks if, to her, they're really friends. Hanako is caught completely off guard by the question. She awkwardly struggles to form an answer, growing flustered just thinking about what Seatome actually means to her. Before she can respond, Ushi suddenly appears below the water tank, calling Seatome's name. When Seatome notices her presence, Ushi says she just wants to talk with him for a second. So Seatome climbs down the ladder, and once they get talking, Ushi immediately apologizes for denying him earlier, explaining that it was kinda awkward for her to introduce him to the other guys she was seeing. Right after apologizing, Ushi asks if Seatome had told anyone about her little escapades with old pappies. When Seatome tells her he hasn't snitched to anyone, Ushi lets out a sigh of relief and admits she always knew she could trust him. But when Ushi notices Seatome staring at her with a slightly judgmental look, she admits she knows what she's doing could get her into serious trouble if it ever gets exposed. When Seatome tries to advise her to just stop, Ushi goes quiet for a second before suddenly bursting into laughter. She explains that if what he's asking her to stop is her hips tango, then he shouldn't worry about it. According to her, all she does with her sugar daddies is hang out and eat dinner. She casually adds that sometimes they get a little handsy, but it's all in exchange for a generous allowance. Still, Seatome tries to stop her from selling herself so cheaply, but Ushi hurriedly cuts the conversation short, and as she leaves, she explains that she got a date that night to prepare for while staring intently at her Tinder account. The rest of the day, Seatome can't focus in class. His mind keeps drifting back to Ushi and the reckless things she's doing. That's when Taki notices how lost in thought he is and casually tells him to let Ushi be and stop worrying about her. Seatome is shocked and wonders how she could possibly know what he and Ushi talked about earlier on the rooftop. But Taki admits she was eavesdropping and overheard their conversation. She then clarifies that she's nothing like Ushi and would never sell her cake to old stinky men, saying that meeting strangers for money is way too risky for her. However, she flips her skirt open and casually adds that she wouldn't mind going out with him. Seatome's brain instantly fries at the sight of her plot, but the moment Taki brings up money again, he realizes she hasn't changed one bit. Later that night, at a downtown cafe, Ushi shows up dressed extra cute to meet her sugar daddy, who's already waiting for her. Once they sit down to order dinner, her four-eyed daddy subtly signals the waiter to shut down the restaurant and close for the night. Ushi, on the other hand, remains completely unaware of what's happening. She happily scans the menu, trying to decide what she wants to eat. That's when her sugar daddy suddenly stops her and says he'd rather have her for dinner instead. Ushi laughs it off, assuming he's joking, and reminds him that they're still inside a restaurant. But his tone changes. He grips her firmly and insists that, after spending so much money on her, he deserves more than just her company. Terrified at the thought of giving her first time to the guy, Ushi begs him to stop. But he refuses, and as the situation teeters on the edge of spiraling out of control, a loud bang suddenly echoes from the front door. Ushi tries to scream for help, but her mouth is quickly covered. Meanwhile, the cafe owner, irritated by the disturbance, heads toward the entrance to see what's going on. When he reaches the door, he apologizes stiffly, claiming the cafe is already closed for the night. But before he can say anything else, Seatome suddenly shoves past him and barges inside, desperately scanning the room for Ushi. Ushi, almost in tears, is both stunned and relieved to see Seatome, while Seatome is just purely shocked when he sees the state she is in. An hour earlier, back at school, Seatome had been unable to shake his worry about Ushi. Noticing how restless he was, Taki then casually offered to ease his mind by telling him where Ushi currently was. Seatome was stunned that Taki even knew her location. But that's when he learned that the girls at the academy all share a group chat, where information spreads frighteningly fast. But what freaks him out the most is when his phone notifies him of a message. And when he opens the message, he is shocked to see a message from Taki giving him Ushi's exact location. Seatome is shocked because he has no idea how Taki even got his number. But Taki doesn't bother explaining and simply keeps directing him on how to locate Ushi. So later that evening, Seatome rushes toward Ushi's location. He knows that following her like this might come off as creepy, but his concern for her safety outweighs everything else. Using the information Taki gave him, Along with help from the other girls in the group chat, Seatome manages to pinpoint Ushi's exact location and get there in time. Back in the present, the nutcase in glasses smiles confidently and asks who Seatome is supposed to be, barging into their private session like this. The question silences Seatome for a moment as he starts sweating bullets. Knowing he has no choice, Seatome lies and says he's Ushi's boyfriend. Upon hearing this, Ushi is clearly caught off guard but stays silent, even when her unhinged sugar daddy demands she confirm it. Her silence convinces the four-eyed dude that the boyfriend's claim is fake, so he scoffs and tells Seatome to piss off and go cry to his mama. But that's when Seatome snaps. He slaps the man hard, knocking the arrogance right out of him and nearly dislocating his shoulder. The guy collapses to the floor, clutching his arm, and immediately starts threatening to sue Seatome for assault. Seatome freezes when he hears the charges. He drops to his knees and desperately begs the guy not to press charges, even offering to do anything he wants, making the situation painfully awkward. But then, out of nowhere, Hanako storms in and punches the man straight in the face, knocking out one of his teeth. Seatome stares in shock, wondering where she even came from. But when the dude also starts threatening Hanako to press assault charges, she grabs him by the collar, calls him a creep, and warns that she'll break every bone in his body if he ever humiliates Seatome like that again. Just then, Seatome gets a message from Taki, telling him she's the one who filled Hanako in on everything because she figured he might need some backup. Thanks to that, Seatome and Hanako manage to save Ushi from being preyed on. As the tension settles, Ushi is overwhelmed with relief, nearly in tears as she gratefully hugs Hanako, thanking her over and over. The next day in class, Ushi also thanks Taki for her help, pulling her into a sincere hug. When Seatome asks if she's finally going to stop her sugar daddy ways, Ushi immediately says yes, and then explains that she's even deleted her Tinder account. Then she goes off the rails again. She suddenly grabs Seatome's hand and announces that she's quitting for good because she now has a boyfriend, leaving everyone completely confused. But Seatome quickly shuts that down, breaking her heart by explaining that it was all just cap, as he only said that to trick her now ex-sugar daddy into backing off. On top of that, Ushi notices how visibly jealous Taki and Hanako get when she calls Seatome her boyfriend, so she decides to respect herself. Meanwhile, as Seatome looks at the three girls, it finally sinks in. Ushi, the defenseless airhead who once relied on compensated dating, Taki, the chief blackmailer, and Hanako, the super cute but terrifying delinquent, are now his friends. In a school full of girls where he once felt completely isolated, Seatome feels genuinely relieved, as for the first time since enrolling, he's finally made friends. Several weeks later, students from two different classes, the business class and the fashion class, gather at the pool for a joint special swimming class. While the girls from the other class are busy changing into their swimsuits in the dressing room, Seatome waits outside, silently wishing they would hurry the heck up. When they finally come out, one girl from the business class with a dragon face immediately starts scolding Seatome for rushing them. The ugly girl, named Sakurako, yells at him and tells him to just change out in the open instead of disturbing their peace. Seatome freezes in fear, unable to defend himself. He knows the girls from the business class are dangerous delinquents, nothing like the comparatively cute, kitten-like girls from his fashion class. But before things can get worse, Taki steps in to defend Seatome, snapping at Sakurako and telling her to close the door while others are still changing. This only makes Sakurako lose her temper, and the two girls look seconds away from tearing each other apart. When Seatome tries to step in and play peacemaker again, both of them immediately shut him down, telling him to stay the heck out of their business. Seatome nearly jumps out of his skin, realizing that the girls are extreme feminists, since the only time they ever seem united is when they're against him. When Hanako shows up, who also happens to be a student from the business class, Sakurako immediately tries to report the issue to her. But Hanako dismisses her right away, saying she's not in the mood for any discussion. However, she casually adds that if it turns into a fight, she's more than ready and won't back down from anyone. Hearing this, both Taki and Sakurako decide not to push the issue further, knowing full well that Hanako is a savage and would whoop both of them without hesitation. Soon after, the swimming class begins. The teacher explains that the lesson for the day will focus on learning how to swim while fully clothed, and immediately instructs all the students to put their shirts and pants back on before entering the pool. But when Sakurako argues that it's pointless to wear a shirt when they're already in swimsuits, the teacher, clearly losing patience, emphasizes that the whole point of the lesson is learning how to swim while fully clothed. Even then, Sakurako struggles to understand. That's when a girl from Seatome's class comments that every girl in the business class must have nothing but air in their brains, and the comment instantly sparks a heated argument between the two classes. But while the girls argue like bitter rivals, Seatome notices that Hanako isn't joining in the banter like her other classmates. That makes him wonder whether she's actually on good terms with them. But before the class rivalry can spiral any further, the teacher announces that they'll begin with floating lessons and asks everyone to pair up according to the roster. By pure coincidence, Hanako, who is number 15 in the business class, ends up paired with Seatome, who is also number 15 in the fashion class. But being paired together immediately creates an awkward tension between them. When the floating lesson begins, the students are instructed to help their partners float comfortably in the water. Hanako tries to help Seatome, but the sudden closeness makes her blush intensely with her entire face turning tomato red. Seatome stares in disbelief when he notices how red and unexpectedly cute she looks, and he starts feeling some kind of way. Still, he forces himself to stay composed so he can focus on floating. Surprisingly, when the teacher notices him in the water, she compliments his posture and tells the rest of the class to watch and learn from him. Soon, all the girls crowd around Seatome, watching him float like a balloon, and the sudden attention makes him panic. After Seatome finishes his turn, it's Hanako's turn, and as he helps steady her in the water, he notices how soft her skin feels and just how flustered she is. He also notices how tense she is, but when he tries to calm her down and help her float more easily, Hanako suddenly hugs him out of nowhere, making him realize she's actually scared of water. Feeling embarrassed, Hanako admits that swimming is the one thing she's truly bad at. Seatome tries to encourage her, but then nervously blurts out, like a complete idiot, that knowing she's bad at something somehow makes him feel more at ease. Hanako looks confused by the comment and awkwardly asks what he means. Seatome immediately panics, realizing how dumb that sounded, and quickly brushes it off by offering to teach her how to swim instead. Meanwhile, Sakurako and the rest of the girls in her class are visibly pissed, irritated by how close and shy Hanako is acting around Seatome. Later that day, up by the water tank, Seatome is sewing a loose piece of fabric when Hanako asks if it's for an assignment or something. But Seatome laughs excitedly and says it's just for fun. He explains that he's actually making a multi-purpose bag for the upcoming Seaside school trip. Hanako is surprised by how much he enjoys sewing. When she casually points it out, Seatome opens up, explaining that his family runs a tailor shop and that he's been helping around the store ever since he was little. He adds that the main reason he enrolled at the academy was to learn more about fashion so he could eventually take on more serious work at the shop. When Seatome asks Hanako why she chose to enroll at the school as well, she goes completely silent for a moment before answering that there isn't really any reason. She says it was simply the closest school to her house. But while listening to Hanako talk, Seatome recalls how, even at the pool, she was always isolated from her classmates and was always alone. With that in mind, Seatome starts to suspect that Hanako doesn't actually like the school very much. Meanwhile, inside the school, in Hanako's business class, the atmosphere is filled with tension and bitterness. Sakurako has rallied the other girls, and they're busy angrily gossiping about Hanako, fuming over how she was openly flirting with Seatome at the pool earlier that day. Another girl named AI joins the conversation, saying she can't stand stupid teenage boys like Seatome and doesn't understand why their all-girls school ever had to become co-ed in the first place. The rest of the girls laugh in agreement, but then one of them suggests they find out what kind of guy Seatome really is. She proposes that if he turns out to be some no-good, creepy horndog, they'll kick him out of the school themselves. So later that afternoon, after classes end, Seatome is busy printing lecture papers for the whole class when Sakurako and her gang of troublesome, nasty girls suddenly burst into the room, demanding to have a chat with him. Seatome immediately panics, realizing the situation feels like a feisty cat cornering a helpless mouse. Before he can even react, Sakurako closes the distance, gets right in his face, and demands to know why he chose to attend their all-girls school. Before Seatome can even respond, Sakurako bursts into laughter, mocking him and saying he must be a creepy loser who thought being the only guy in the school would turn him into some kind of harem lord. Seatome just stands there frozen, trembling from fear, seeing how scary close the girls are, and even worse how revealing their uniforms are. But when Sakurako keeps pushing, accusing him of enrolling just to get a free OnlyFans subscription, something inside Seatome finally snaps. The fear on his face shifts into defiance, and for once, he stops acting like a spineless wimp. He stands up for himself, saying he actually joined the school because he wants to learn about fashion, and also because he has an undying love for making clothes. The moment those words leave his mouth, the girls fall silent, staring at him like he just told the world's worst joke on Comedy Central. Then they burst out laughing, mocking his reason and calling him a sissy weirdo. They continue laughing until Seatome can't take it anymore, and he nervously yells, saying there is nothing wrong with a guy who actually loves making clothes. His confidence freezes the girls, and then Sakurako immediately gets in his face, warning him not to get carried away, and threatens to beat him to a pulp if he continues to act like the main character of the story. At first, Seatome is shaking with raw fear, but then something unexpected catches his attention. He notices that Sakurako's armpit sleeve is torn, ripped open like the shirt of a mental patient. When he points it out, Sakurako recoils in embarrassment and angrily threatens to send him to an early grave. Panicking, Seatome quickly explains that the tear was just too noticeable to ignore. But Sakurako gets all defensive like a spoiled brat caught stealing candies. Still, Seatome nervously offers to stitch the torn shirt back up in 15 minutes. Sakurako hesitates, her swollen ego clearly fighting the idea. But a few minutes later, back in her class, she suddenly all smiles, telling everyone how Seatome is actually a nice guy for fixing her shirt. As it turns out, Seatome didn't just fix her shirt. He ended up repairing most of the torn clothing belonging to the other girls as well. When one of the girls later asks AI what she thinks of Seatome now, AI goes quiet. As to her surprise, she realizes her heart is starting to melt for him. The following month, the entire school heads out on a seaside trip, and on this trip, Seatome can't help but notice how differently the girls from the business class treat him now, showing him unexpected care and attention. The Seaside trip is a joint first-year event organized by the school to improve relationships between students and help them understand one another better. In theory, it's meant to be a fun bonding experience, but in reality, it's a living nightmare for Seatome. Surrounded by girls in swimsuits all day, Seatome is forced to fight a constant internal battle just to control his hormones from lashing out. Ushi looks especially cute in a flower-patterned swimsuit, and Seatome nearly short-circuits the moment he sees her. Taki isn't making things any easier either, wearing a sleek black swimsuit that makes him immediately look away before his virgin brains explode. Then there's Hanako. Her swimsuit is simple and plain, yet somehow she still steals the spotlight with her insane curves. When the three of them smile and jokingly ask Seatome who the hottest among them is, he's way too flustered to give an answer, and his mind completely blanks. Off to the side, Sakurako watches the scene and is dying of jealousy and bitterness. What irritates her most isn't just the attention Seatome is getting from the fashion class girls, but Hanako herself. Hanako is supposed to be one of them, yet she spends most of her time with Seatome and the fashion class instead. AI is just as disappointed. She had always seen Hanako as a strong, independent girl, not a simp who can't go a minute without hovering around a Seatome. Even Moe, one of AI's fangirls, shares that frustration. Seeing her queen in such a foul mood because of Seatome leaves her visibly upset. Hours later, when the main activity of the day finally begins, the girls rush into the water, laughter echoing across the beach as the trip officially kicks off. However, before the activity begins, the teacher warns everyone to be careful, reminding them not to wander too far without a float. Just then, Sakurako can't hold in her bitterness anymore and challenges the fashion class girls to a swimming competition. The girls of the fashion class eagerly accepts, and when the race starts, Seatome is shocked to see Ushi dusting everyone else. That's when he realizes that Ushi swims like a mermaid on caffeine or better, still floats easily because of the massive floaters she carries. Meanwhile, Hanako struggles just to keep her balance. In the end, Ushi easily wins the competition for the fashion class, much to Sakurako's irritation and frustration. To make things worse, Ushi rubs salt in the wound by mocking Sakurako and bragging about how flawlessly she beat her class, and this only pushes Sakurako closer to losing her mind. After the competition, the girls are instructed to take showers and drop their swimsuits into a basket, and Moe is in charge of gathering the swimsuits. As Moe carries the basket away, she notices that Seatome has carelessly left his room door open, and this immediately annoys her, since Seatome, being the only guy, gets a private room while the rest of them are forced to share. Outside, Seatome and Hanako emerge from the water looking completely exhausted after the race. Hanako suggests that Seatome go take a shower while she stays behind at the shore to catch her breath. She then genuinely thanks him for teaching her how to swim, surprising Seatome with how sincere she sounds. Seatome agrees and heads off, and while he walks away, Hanako watches him leave, quietly smiling and blushing to herself. Later, inside Seatome's room, he hurriedly rummages through his bag, looking for a change of clothes and a towel so he can take a shower. Instead, he freezes when he finds worn swimsuits stuffed inside. The sight leaves him shocked and completely confused. While Seatome's lagging brain cells are still trying to figure out how the swimsuits ended up inside his bag, Moe, the real culprit, is just outside his door, laughing to herself in excitement. She sees this plan as the perfect way to finally get rid of Seatome. A few minutes earlier, after collecting the swimsuits, Moe decided to set him up by stuffing them into his bag instead of taking them to be washed. Her goal was simple. Once the swimsuits were discovered, everyone would assume Seatome was a disgusting creep who stole girls' swimwear. She did it hoping it would make AI, who openly despises guys, happy. So while waiting for the perfect moment to raise the alarm, Moe suddenly notices Hanako and Taki heading towards Seatome's room, arguing over who should tell him that the showers are now open. Watching them from a distance, Moe quickly changes her plan. Instead of exposing Seatome herself, she decides it would be far better to let Hanako and Taki catch him in the act. So the moment Hanako and Taki storm into Seatome's room, Seatome panics. Acting on pure instinct, he hurriedly hides the bag, desperate to make sure they don't see it filled with sweaty swimsuits. But Seatome's awkward reaction to their sudden presence only makes the girls more shocked and curious. Realizing there's no way to hide it anymore, Seatome finally shows them the swimsuits, frantically explaining that he only just found them inside his bag. Watching from outside, Moe smiles to herself, hoping the situation will spiral out of control. But she gets the shock of her life when Hanako immediately believes Seatome is innocent. She calmly tells him to relax, assuring him that everything will be fine. Seatome, drenched in sweat and barely holding himself together, is completely taken aback by her reaction. But his surprise deepens when Taki also says she believes he's innocent. Meanwhile, watching from outside, Moe is surprisingly confused, noticing how calm and casual Hanako and Taki is, even after finding out about the swimsuits, since she was expecting them to scream in a situation like this. But then she decides to wait and watch a little longer, hoping the situation would change. However, she freezes when she overhears Hanako threatening to fish out the dumb fool that is responsible and teach her a very bitter lesson. Moe starts sweating, but what crumbles her totally is when she also overhears Taki suggesting that the culprit must be someone who could move a large number of swimsuits without raising suspicion, which likely means it's one of the girls from the business class. With the suspicion now set at one of the girls from the business class, Hanako immediately heads in the direction of their dorm, swearing she'll beat confessions out of them one by one. That's when Moe takes off running in panic, realizing she is going to get beat up by Hanako. On her way, Moe crashes straight into her queen mother, AI, who's caught completely off guard and immediately asks why she's running around like that. Panicking, Moe desperately begs AI to save her. She blurts out that she only did what she did to make AI happy, hoping that if Seatome got kicked out of the school, AI would stop being sad. But AI stares at her in confusion, having no idea what Moe is even talking about. AI bluntly tells her that she doesn't remember ever asking anyone to do something just to make her happy. But when it dawns on her that Moe may have done something terrible to Seatome, AI's expression hardens, and she scolds Moe for even attempting something so stupid. AI then reflects on where her hatred for boys originally came from. Years ago, when she was still on the sports team, the boys constantly hovered around her, endlessly simping over her hourglass shape. One day, one of them boys finally worked up the courage to ask her out, but AI, being a novice in the dating game, politely turned him down. However, the very next day, rumors began spreading around the school, and everyone whispered that AI was arrogant, and that she thought she was hotter than every other girl. AI immediately realized that it had to be the dude she rejected who started the malicious gossip. So from that day on, her distrust of boys took root and slowly grew into outright hatred. Back in the present, Moe apologizes to AI for trying to set Seatome up. Meanwhile, inside Seatome's room, Seatome immediately stops Hanako from storming off to beat anyone up. He begs her not to go, explaining that doing so would only ruin the Seaside trip for everyone. He also reassures both Hanako and Taki that he's genuinely happy, and that just knowing they believe and trust him means more than enough. The girls are surprised by his reaction, but after a moment, Hanako reluctantly agrees to let the matter die. Later that night, all the students gather around for a campfire event. There, the teacher instructs everyone to pair up for a competition that involves running to the goal at the top of a hill. So while the other girls quickly start forming pairs, Hanako, Taki, and Ushi all have the same idea in mind. Each of them is determined to pair up with Seatome. But as they all hurry to pair up with Seatome, they freezes when AI beat them to it and approaches Seatome first. When she suggests Seatome pairs up with her, Seatome brain shuts down for a minute, unable to believe, while Hanako, Taki, and Ushi are almost losing their minds and staring in total disbelief. When the competition starts, Ushi and Taki are startled by a student disguised as a monster. After regaining their composure, they continue walking up the hill while keeping an eye out for Seatome. Along the way, Taki decides to break the silence and asks Ushi if she likes Seatome. Ushi pauses for a moment, then laughs shyly and admits that she likes him a lot. In fact, she goes as far as to say she loves him. Taki's eyes widen at the honesty of her reply. But Ushi then explains that after Seatome saved her from the horrible sugar daddy incident and never asked for anything in return, she realized he was completely different from all the scummy guys she'd dealt with before. Taki falls silent after hearing this, but her quiet response makes Ushi curious, so she turns the question back on her and asks if she likes Seatome too. Taki blushes hard before admitting that Seatome is built different. She says she's shown him her peach covers countless times, yet he never once fell for it. She also honestly admits that she doesn't want Seatome to be toyed with by girls from other classes, especially after the swimsuit prank earlier. Meanwhile, deeper in the woods, Seatome tries to strike up a conversation with AI. But she says nothing, only staring at him like he's some kind of creep, and her silence makes Seatome increasingly uncomfortable and awkward. Fed up with even trying, Seatome decides to just hurry to the goal as fast as possible and get the whole thing over with. As he walks ahead, AI trails behind, deep in thought. She struggles internally, trying to figure out how to talk to him, since for years she hasn't really spoken to any boy. She wants to apologize for what Moe did earlier and also thank Seatome for not ratting her out, but with every step, it feels harder to say anything. Desperate to get it over with, AI awkwardly tries to speak, but instead ends up bumping into Seatome and knocking him over, and the two crash to the ground together. Seatome freaks out, confused about what just happened, while AI hurriedly apologizes, explaining that she was walking too fast and lost her balance. Their flashlight goes flying and lands far away. So with no way to see clearly, Seatome suggests they wait for another pair to come by and find them. As they sit there in the dark, AI finally gathers the courage to confess. She nervously admits that her friend Moe was the one who planted the swimsuits in his bag. She apologizes again, explaining that Moe isn't a bad person, just confused and desperate. As she speaks, AI reflects on the first day she met Moe and how excited Moe was just to have her as a friend. Seatome listens quietly, tells her it's fine, and then says he's just relieved that everything is finally over. He opens up to AI, admitting that ever since he started at the school, it's felt like everyone has some kind of beef with him, probably just because he's the only guy there. Hearing this, AI realizes something important. Seatome is a lot like how she used to be herself, isolated, misunderstood, and judged without being truly known. Back at her former school, even though AI never intended to stand out, she became the center of attention because of the malicious rumors spread about her. When she eventually transferred to the all-girls school, everyone treated her kindly, and she slowly forgot what it felt like to be alone. Overwhelmed by emotion, AI thanks Seatome for reminding her that there are still genuine guys like him out there, and then also apologizes for misunderstanding him all this time. Just then, Hanako suddenly emerges from the bushes, holding a flashlight, and immediately accuses Seatome and AI of doing something freaky in the dark. But Seatome hurriedly explains that they simply lost their flashlight. But before he can finish, Ushi and Taki burst out of nowhere, throwing themselves at him in relief. Moments later, Sakurako and Moe also show up, demanding to know what AI is doing with the fashion class girls, and AI calmly explains that she's paired up with Seatome. Sakurako is stunned by the answer, but AI then adds that Seatome isn't such a bad guy after all. At the very least, she says, she's certain he didn't enroll in the school just to chase cheap fantasies or pop his cherry. Later the following morning, while the girls are taking their baths, Ushi notices AI entering to bathe as well and decides to strike up a conversation. She sits beside her, curious about why AI chose to pair up with Seatome during the competition earlier. Embarrassed, AI hesitates. She blushes hard and refuses to share anything, but Ushi keeps pressing, insisting on knowing what kind of relationship AI has with Seatome. However, when the pestering starts to get out of hand, Moe suddenly shows up and tells Ushi to back off. She warns her to leave AI alone, saying AI isn't interested in their stupid, desperate romance over Seatome. Just then, AI finally speaks up, but instead of answering Ushi's question, she turns the tables and asks Ushi if she likes Seatome. Ushi, never one to be shy, boldly admits that she does. She even encourages AI not to hide her feelings, saying she wouldn't get jealous even if AI liked Seatome too. Hearing this, AI finds herself unexpectedly drawn to Ushi's honesty and upbeat personality. She admits that she likes Ushi for being so straightforward, but deep down, AI starts to wonder when romance even became something she cared about. Meanwhile, Seatome waits in his room, wondering why the girls are taking so long to finish bathing. Eventually, the Ninja Turtle-headed dorm master shows up and tells him he still has to wait a bit longer, since the male-female ratio is completely unbalanced at this school. As a result, the girls also need to use the male side of the bath. After what feels like an eternity, Taki finally comes to let him know that the girls are done and that he can go in now. But as she speaks, Seatome gets completely distracted, staring at her wet hair and flushed cheeks. Taki notices him gawking like a fool and decides to take advantage of his wandering eyes to flirt with him again. So she immediately starts teasing him, calling him out and asking if he's imagining touching her freshly bathed skin. But Seatome panics, flailing nervously as he insists he's thinking about nothing at all. He then accuses her of teasing him again just to mess with him and quickly makes his escape. Left alone, Taki lets out a quiet sigh, clearly frustrated by the constant rejection she keeps getting from Seatome. For a moment she feels insecure, wishing she were as cute as Ushi or as calm and composed as AI. Then Seatome suddenly stops, turns back, and thanks her for letting him know the bath was free. Taki freezes in place, completely flustered, unable to say a single word. When Seatome finally gets to the bath later that day, he sinks into the water right away, relieved to enjoy some peace and quiet at last. As he relaxes, he reflects on all the chaos that happened earlier that day and how he somehow managed to survive every bit of it. But just as he's starting to settle in, Hanako suddenly appears, thinking the bath is empty. She steps in with a towel wrapped tightly around her chest, only to freeze the moment she notices Seatome already in the water. Both of them panic at the same time. Seatome hurriedly explains that he was told the bath was free and assumed all the girls were already done. Hanako, flustered beyond words, struggles to respond. Before either of them can say much else, Ushi suddenly bursts into the bathhouse with a group of girls, cheerfully insisting they've come to wash Seatome's back. Instead of finding him alone, they're greeted by the sight of Hanako standing stiffly in the pool. Confused, Ushi asks why Hanako is there, since it was supposed to be Seatome's turn. Completely red with embarrassment, Hanako admits that she was too shy to bathe with the other girls, so she decided to come later, hoping to have a quiet bath by herself. Unfortunately, that quiet plan accidentally puts her in the same space as Seatome, which was absolutely not on her bingo card for the day. When Ushi casually suggests she'll just let Seatome know the bath will be occupied longer, Hanako freezes in horror and immediately begs her not to. Meanwhile, Seatome stays under the hot water for a bit too long, desperately trying to hide and avoid being seen. When Ushi and the other girls finally leave, Hanako lets out a sigh of relief. But as she hurriedly turns to tell Seatome to get out of the tub quickly, she notices something is wrong. Seatome looks dizzy, barely able to keep himself upright, and Hanako realizes he's been under the hot water for far too long. Panic hits instantly. She rushes forward and grabs him just before he can sink, holding him against her as she calls his name in fear. With effort, she manages to steady him against her shoulder. The next moment, Seatome wakes up, groggy and confused, only to find himself lying on his bed. Standing over him are Hanako, Taki, Ushi, and the turtle-headed dorm master, all wearing worried expressions. When Seatome nervously asks what happened, the dorm master explains that he collapsed while bathing, and that Hanako luckily found him just in time and brought him back to his room. To keep anyone from suspecting the truth, Hanako quickly lies, saying that Seatome must have entered the bath right after she had already finished and left. She repeatedly apologizes, convinced the whole incident is her fault. However, once everyone else leaves, Hanako quietly pleads with Seatome not to tell anyone that she was actually in the bathtub with him, and to forget anything he might have seen. Her voice is soft and filled with embarrassment. Seatome immediately agrees, swearing he won't say a word. Still, deep down, he knows the truth that matter how hard he tries. What he saw in that bath is permanently burned into his memory. Right after all the late-night chaos, Hanako stands in the hallway looking flustered, still clearly shaken by everything that just happened. Ushi soon runs into her and casually compliments her cute pajamas. But before they can chat any further, the dorm supervisor suddenly appears and shuts everything down, reminding them that lights were supposed to be off after roll call and ordering everyone back to bed. Later that night, the girls are all tucked into their futons, lying awake in the dark, but the tension hasn't gone anywhere. Ushi then casually strikes up a conversation with Hanako, noticing she can't sleep. Hanako, however, immediately notices that Ushi isn't wearing anything under the covers, and bluntly calls her out for being naked like it's the most normal thing in the world. Ushi calmly explains that this is just how she always sleeps and even suggests Hanako try it, saying it's much more relaxing. Hanako quickly refuses, clearly uncomfortable, and instead asks why Ushi invited her to join their group in the first place, especially since she's the only one from the business class. Ushi answers honestly, saying it's simply because they're friends and she genuinely wanted to hang out with her. That simple answer catches Hanako off guard and leaves her quietly processing it while lying there. Ushi then decides to pull Taki into the conversation, but Taki immediately shuts it down. She says she wants no part in it, pointing out that Hanako doesn't even like her anyway, and then explains that she's only been messing with Seatome all this time. But her comment immediately pisses Hanako off, who immediately shoots up from her futon and angrily reminds Taki that blackmailing Seatome with her plot cover definitely counts as more than just messing with him. Ushi tries to act all surprised and innocent, hearing that Taki blackmailed Seatome. But Hanako quickly turns on her too, reminding her that she also forced Seatome to do all her assignments by himself. But then the conversation shifts, as Taki now wants to know why Hanako keeps showing up to defend Seatome. Hanako stiffens, clearly not expecting to be confronted like that. But then she awkwardly admits that at first she thought of Seatome as a spineless pipsqueak that needs her protection. With an eager expression, Ushi then asks both Taki and Hanako if they've both fallen for Seatome. Hanako and Taki instantly get all defensive at the question. But just then, the dorm supervisor angrily barges into the room, demanding they stop their silly chit-chat and go to sleep immediately. She warns them that if she hears even a single word again, she'll make sure they all end up in summer supplementary classes. Once the supervisor leaves, the girls hide under their futons. But in the silence, Hanako firmly declares that she won't stand by and let anyone take advantage of Seatome anymore. Taki is threatened by the statement, feeling as though Hanako is speaking directly to her. Taking it as a challenge, she openly declares that she'll make Seatome fall for her for real and prove just how serious she is about him. Not to be outdone, Ushi cheerfully announces that she'll simply have to get even more serious about winning Seatome over as well. In that quiet, tense moment, it becomes painfully clear that all three girls are in love with the same guy, and none of them has any intention of backing down. Meanwhile, Seatome lies in his bed completely drained, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of why his body still feels weak after collapsing in the bath earlier. He sneezes, shrugs it off, and decides he should probably go use the toilet. But as he steps into the hallway, he coincidentally runs into Hanako, who's also heading in the same direction. Both of them panic, call out each other's names at the exact same time, and immediately hear footsteps approaching. They glance down the hall and see the dorm supervisor walking toward them. So without thinking, Hanako quickly grabs Seatome's arm and yanks him away, pulling him into a corner and forcing them to hide together like fugitives. They crouch there in silence, barely breathing, as the nosy dorm supervisor walks past, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Once the danger passes, Seatome quietly asks if it was really necessary to hide, since they were just going to the bathroom anyway. Hanako whispers back that they probably dodged a bullet, especially after remembering the earlier threat about extra classes for anyone caught out late. However, the relief quickly turns into embarrassment as Hanako realizes how awkward the situation is, especially considering they were just talking about Seatome moments earlier. Eventually, they end up sitting together outside, and when the night air grows too cold, Seatome quietly drapes his jacket over Hanako's shoulders. When Hanako points out how cold it is and asks if he's okay, Seatome admits that since she's helped him so much, he had decided earlier to give her his jacket to show his little gratitude. He then thanks her softly, and that simple expression of gratitude completely catches Hanako off guard. But Hanako quickly brushes it off, saying she just hates seeing people take advantage of others, and that's why she keeps stepping in. Still, she admits that she's probably caused him more trouble during the trip than she's actually helped. As she speaks, Hanako remembers the conversation she had earlier with Ushi and Taki, and realizes that despite pretending to be tough, she's deeply embarrassed and confused inside. Her body trembles slightly as she struggles to understand why she feels so shy around Seatome, and it's a feeling she's never experienced before. But suddenly, in the midst of the tension, Hanako hears footsteps approaching. Realizing it's probably the dorm supervisor making another round, she quickly pulls Seatome down the stairs and presses herself close to him so they can stay hidden. While burying his face in her pom-poms, Seatome freezes, his heart pounding, while Hanako blushes furiously. In that moment, Hanako finally accepts what she has been avoiding the entire time. She realizes she is in love with him. Once the dorm supervisor finally leaves, Hanako quickly lets go of Seatome, realizing how close she's been holding him. Completely overwhelmed with embarrassment and unable to face him after such an intense moment, she panics and bolts down the hallway, rushing back to the girls' room without saying a word. Meanwhile, Seatome is left standing there, stunned and confused, still feeling the warmth and softness of Hanako's juicy balloons on his face. Later that night, Hanako quietly returns to the room and slips into her futon, still flustered and unable to calm down. As she lies there, she notices she is still wearing Seatome's jacket, realizing she forgot to take it off. She pulls it closer, quietly holding onto it as she finally falls asleep. Several weeks later, Seatome finds himself stuck in the school library with Taki during summer break, helping reorganize books as part of their class committee duties. He had assumed the job would be easy, especially since the library has air conditioning. But reality quickly proves him wrong when the AC barely keeps up, turning the place into a quiet oven. Only a handful of students are even on campus, mostly club members and unlucky committee reps like Seatome and Taki. Earlier that day, the teacher apologized for dragging them in during summer, but insisted the work had to be done during daytime hours. Taki immediately regrets not wearing her PE clothes. She's already sweating through her uniform and looks visibly uncomfortable. Eventually, she loosens her tie and unbuttons a few buttons on her shirt to cool off. But the moment Seatome glances at her chest divide, Taki gets embarrassed and warns him to stop staring. However, she starts spiraling in her own head, wondering why she is suddenly getting all defensive just because Seatome looked at her plot balls. She remembers telling Hanako and Ushi that she was going to get serious about him, and now she realizes she might actually be getting nervous and self-conscious around Seatome for real. As she bends down to pick up books from the floor, it dawns on her that Hanako isn't around to protect him this time. So with just the two of them alone in the overheated library, Taki quietly decides this might be the perfect chance to make a move. Determined, Taki sees this as the perfect intimate moment to get ahead of her rivals, Hanako and Ushi. However, her confidence wavers when Seatome casually offers to carry the heavy stacks of books himself, telling her to just line them up while he handles the lifting. That small gesture hits harder than it should. Taki catches herself thinking that he seems more reliable and manly than she ever gave him credit for, even though he's really just being his usual kind, considerate self. Her thoughts drift back to when she first met him, remembering how she dismissed him as a boring, unreliable wimp and nothing more than an easy target. But the more she watches him now, the more she realizes he was never like that at all. She recalls how he forgave girls who treated him badly and how he never held grudges, even when people tried to frame or mock him. Compared to that, she admits that her own behavior toward him feels stupid in hindsight. As the heat in the library builds, Taki starts overthinking everything. She tells herself there's no reason to be nervous, that he should be the one feeling uncomfortable around her. With that thought in mind, she convinces herself that this is the moment to make him fall for her. Alone together in the overheated library, she's certain there's no way he won't crack. So she starts by complaining of the heat, and then casually lifts her skirt just enough to tease, explaining how it's actually even hotter under a girl's skirt than most guys think. Seatome freezes on the spot, completely overwhelmed. Encouraged by his reaction, Taki pushes her advantage just a bit further, lifting the fabric slightly more and proudly showing off her juicy drumsticks. But suddenly, Taki gets shy again and quickly covers herself up. She starts wondering why she's getting embarrassed over the smallest things around Seatome. She remembers how bold she used to be, especially on the rooftop, flashing him without a second thought. Now she's confused about why she's suddenly covering herself and feeling self-conscious, like this is all unfamiliar territory. Trying to snap out of it, she forces herself back into work mode. She decides to reshelve the books herself and tells Seatome to hand them up to her. Determined to stay in control, she climbs the ladder and acts confident, pretending her heart isn't racing at all. Seatome, being his usual helpful self, offers to shelve the books instead, but she brushes him off and insists she's got it handled. As they work, Seatome casually thanks her and starts talking about how much she's helped him since he transferred schools. He brings up how she helped with Ushi and her sugar daddy incident, and how she and Hanako believed in him when he was nearly framed with the bag of swimsuits. He admits he was shocked when Taki and her friends tried to extort him on the rooftop. Then he adds that if that hadn't happened, he might never have met Taki. He thanks her for everything and admits it was wrong of him to judge her too quickly, hinting that he judged her by her cover instead of who she really was. Hearing all this completely throws Taki off balance, and her face immediately heats up as she blushes hard. Trying not to lose focus, she brushes off his gratitude, saying she didn't really think much about what she did and just acted on impulse. However, deep down, she is nervously trying to shake off the overwhelming emotions, knowing fully well that the mission is to make Seatome's heart skip and not the other way around. But while she's distracted by her thoughts, she suddenly loses her footing on the ladder, sending books tumbling and herself awkwardly crashing her cake on top of Seatome's head. With her skirt covering Seatome's mug, Taki panics and immediately begs him not to look at her no-go zones. As Taki scrambles to cover herself, Seatome immediately tries to turn away, but he can't quite manage it in the chaos of the moment. Once she finally frees herself from the awkward position, she shyly asks if he saw anything he wasn't supposed to. Seatome admits that he did, but quickly insists it was purely an accident, nervously adding that he doesn't have any money to pay or anything like that. Flustered, Taki tells him not to worry and promises she won't bring up money with him ever again. Seatome is surprised by that, but Taki finds herself even more confused. She wonders why she's so embarrassed this time, since it's not like it's the first time Seatome has seen her plot covers, and he has seen way bolder ones in the past. Sitting there, replaying everything in her head, Taki slowly comes to a realization. For the first time, she admits to herself that it's not just about teasing or control anymore, and that her heart might be reacting in ways she never expected. Who among the desperate girls will eventually win Seatome's heart? Comment, "Boy alone," if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.